There is a book that claims to explain what Genesis 6 leaves in the shadows: the angels, the giants, the forbidden knowledge, and the corruption that came before the flood. Most Christians have heard of it. Many churches avoid it, and yet its shadow still falls across one of the strangest passages in the Bible. Genesis chapter 6 says that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, took them as wives, and that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. Then, almost immediately, the story moves toward judgment, the flood. But ancient readers did not move past that passage so easily. They asked the question people are still asking today: who were the sons of God? What were the Nephilim? And why did human corruption become so severe that God judged the ancient world with water? That is where the Book of Enoch enters the conversation. It is one of the most influential ancient writings ever connected to the mystery of Genesis 6. And whether someone sees it as sacred, historical, or symbolic, one thing is undeniable: it gives one of the darkest and most detailed explanations of what ancient people believed happened before the flood. According to the text, the story begins with a group of heavenly beings called the Watchers. Their role was supposed to be observation. They watched over the human world. But watching was not enough. The Watchers looked down at humanity, saw the daughters of men, and crossed a boundary they were never meant to cross. They descended, they rebelled, and they brought corruption with them. In these pages, these beings are not described merely as curious spirits. They become teachers of forbidden knowledge. They teach humanity things it was not spiritually mature enough to carry: weapons, sorcery, astrology, vanity, violence, secrets that promised power but produced ruin. And this is where the story becomes terrifying, because here, evil does not spread only because human beings become immoral. Evil spreads because heaven and earth are violated. The boundary between the spiritual realm and the human realm is broken, and from that corruption come the giants, the Nephilim, massive, violent beings born from a union that should never have happened. They do not become heroes. They become devourers. The earth begins to groan under their violence. Humanity is not merely sinful, creation is disordered. The world before the flood is not presented as a place of small mistakes or private failures. It is a world infected at the roots. And this is why this ancient record matters. It tries to explain why the flood was not random, why judgment was not emotional, why the ancient world had reached a point where corruption was no longer contained in individual human choices, but had spread through the whole structure of life. Genesis says the earth was filled with violence. This account imagines what that violence looked like: a world where human beings were being taught how to destroy themselves faster, a world where power replaced obedience, a world where knowledge separated from holiness became a weapon. That may be the most haunting warning in the entire text. Not all knowledge saves. Some knowledge corrupts the soul that receives it. The Watchers gave humanity power without righteousness, and that combination always leads to collapse. But the narrative does not stop with rebellion. It moves toward judgment. The cries of the earth rise before God. The violence can no longer be ignored. And the Watchers, who thought they could descend without consequence, are sentenced. Their power does not protect them. Their knowledge does not save them. Their rebellion does not last forever. They are bound, they are judged, and the world they corrupted is washed by the flood. This is why this specific manuscript became so fascinating to generations of readers. It fills in the shadows around Genesis 6. It gives names, motives, scenes, and consequences to a passage that the Bible itself leaves mysterious. This is why the early church fathers read it, and why later councils buried it. It was too dangerous. It named the architects of human destruction. It explicitly states that a watcher named Azazel taught men how to forge swords, shields, and the instruments of death. They didn't just corrupt human flesh, they militarized it. The New Testament book of Jude even quotes a prophecy associated with Enoch. That proves this. It was not a random text. It lived near the edges of biblical thought, close enough to be remembered, strange enough to be debated, powerful enough to haunt the story of Genesis. And maybe that is why people still return to it, because Genesis 6 gives us the door, but Enoch lets us imagine what ancient readers believed was behind it. The Watchers, the forbidden knowledge, the giants, the violence, the judgment, the flood. It is a story about what happens when spiritual beings rebel, when humans welcome corruption, and when power is separated from obedience to God. But the deepest warning is not only about ancient giants. It is about the human hunger for knowledge without holiness, power without submission, freedom without truth, progress without God. That was the world before the flood. And according to this dark witness, that world did not collapse because it lacked knowledge. It collapsed because it received knowledge without wisdom. That is why this book still disturbs people, not because it answers every question, but because it touches the question Genesis leaves burning in the dark. What really happened before the flood? It still stands at the doorway of Genesis 6 like a dark witness, pointing back to a world where knowledge became corruption, power became violence, and heaven itself was accused of crossing the line. Before the waters rose, before Noah entered the ark, before the old world disappeared beneath judgment, something had gone terribly wrong, not only on earth, but in the heavens above it.